Lieutenant Art Weisgerber has been the commanding officer of the Crime Scene Investigation Unit at Noir. So CSI, if you've watched CSI, it's one of the guys in the police department since 2011. The unit is responsible for the processing of forensic evidence at major crime scenes and fatal crash scenes, along with evidence collected by other divisions. He joined the department in 1988 and has worked in the Patrol Division, the Narcotics Unit, the Detective Bureau as both detective and detective sergeant before assuming command of the crime scene unit. During his time at the Detective Bureau, he was assigned to the Cold Case Unit. We definitely have questions about cold cases. And closed several cases by arrest or identification of human remains. He is also an adjunct police instructor for the State of Connecticut Municipal Police Officer Academy. And he teaches crime scene procedure investigation privately for the Criminal Justice Training Network, Spectre Criminal Justice Training Network. Dr. Lauren Thoma is a forensic pathologist. So when you're reading books about forensic pathologists, I'm going to ask her questions about what she does and how it's different from being an ME. She's working in central New Jersey. She's performed nearly, get this, 2,500 autopsies.
Actually, as of today, I've hit right on 2,500.
All right. So it's not nearly, it is 2,500 autopsies. And testified 65 times in Superior Court in New Jersey and New York, and in federal court. Originally from the Philadelphia suburbs, she obtained her BS in biology at Wilson College in Pennsylvania, received her MD from Jefferson, my alma mater too. In Philly, she underwent 4 years of residency training in anatomic and clinical pathology at the University of Penn. Philadelphia, and completed her fellowship at the Office of the ME in the City of New York. She has board certifications that are too long for me to pronounce. In anatomic, clinical, forensic, the line keeps going. She has a special interest in long-term unidentified cases, cold cases again, overdose fatalities, tragic, and quality improvement in death investigation. And last but not least, Kimberlee Sue Moran has over 20 years of experience as a forensic consultant and educator, both in the UK and the US. She's an associate teaching professor at Rutgers, Camden, and Kimberlee has worked on several cases in a range of capacities. She runs training workshops for local law enforcement that include blowing up transit buses. If you ever wanted to do that, talk to her. Just to see what that may look like. And digging up dead animals. Yummy. Her doctoral research was in the field of ancient fingerprints. Ancient fingerprints. Come join. We're just doing introductions. Come join. And her current research is in taphonomy, which I do not know what that is, so I'll be asking you the process of decomposition. She is a fellow of the American Academy of Forensic Science, an active member of Society for American Archaeology, and the UK Fingerprint Society, and actually about a dozen more. I'm going to skip ahead. She's she's a co-editor of Forensic Archaeology, Multidisciplinary Perspectives is a book. We're going to ask about that. And she served on the Crime Scene Investigation Subcommittee for this organization of Scientific Area Committees, OSAC. So she's passionate about public outreach, STEM education, and science in the service of justice. And she's a recipient of the 2021 Chancellor's Teaching Award. And me, now my resume is going to appear really dismal. I'm the first Indian-born author to receive Minotaur Books Award for Best First Crime Fiction. And my debut novel, which is actually back there, it's a yellow one, Murder No Bombay, won an audiophile award, Edgar Astley, and was a finalist for a bunch more. My sequel, Peril at the Exposition, describes conflict during the Gilded Age, which planted the seeds of today's red-blue divide. You want to know why we think so differently? There's one answer right there. My third book, The Spanish Diplomat's Secret, traces the origins of the Spanish Civil War over Cuba. And then my books deal with issues of identity, race, and moral boundaries. And I did have a previous career in data sciences. Okay, I'm also president of the New York chapter of Mystery Writers of America, which is why I get to do this lovely talk. Okay, so that said, I'm going to ask Art to take us through a few slides, and then this is sort of the textbook part where you learn a little bit about this this process and this area of investigation, and then we're going to have our little talk. So if the other speakers want to go back there, and then...
So I'm going to kind of do an overview of the different processing or what we're looking for to help identify who's involved or who the victim is and so forth, and I have a variety of displays. So first, the screen's off here a little bit. That's my crime scene unit, because that's what everybody is taught by watching TV of what a crime scene unit consists of. A lot of times it's not that many people, and no, we do not wear designer jeans at the scene, and we all don't walk in the room either, so we have kind of assigned duties when we do it. And just like Tom Cruise in Minority Report, my office is set up with the future screen where we're able to take a look to see what's going on, where you are at any moment, and what you did. And then pretty much we're all attuned to everything is solved in 42 minutes. We wear these outfits. And I like the shows that show me that the crime scene investigator also then goes and works in a lab as a scientist, is the interviewer of the suspects, and I've seen some shows where they're actually doing the entry ahead of the SWAT team. Like, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. Like, I'm the last person at the scene, tape is already up around it, and I come later on and all that stuff once everything's kind of calmed down. And then we do not spend most of our day talking about co-worker issues and stuff like that, but we might. So based on everything of that, those are the keys of being an expert witness. Everything is on TV is true, don't touch anything. So pretty much if that's what your impression is of the work, you're going to have troubles when you write sometimes, I think, for some of the stories. Because I think this day and age, your readers are a little more in tune of some of the techniques or what's used. And I know if you're writing, you're trying not to be too technical, because you're trying to tell a story also. But I think there's some accuracy that has to be thrown in there. So one of the things I'm going to throw in here in the beginning is everybody loves DNA because it's very sexy, right? There's not a lot to it. It's kind of clean. So for the most part, if we're talking about DNA, we're kind of looking at single source, which is nucleic, pretty much blood, semen, or saliva, or maybe a hair with a root at the scene. We want to kind of collect and preserve. And those are usually our best DNA sources. And also, in the state of Connecticut, we have the rapid DNA kiosk machines in probably about 9 or 11 places. So we can take some of those single source DNA, pop them into a rapid DNA machine in 90 minutes. If there's a good profile, we get the results. And then the lab still does a secondary test down the road of it, but for the initial investigative lead, we have that. So the other area is touch DNA. Those are pretty much the skin tags and oils and the moisture residue left behind with latent prints. So there's another chance of getting DNA. That could be a little bit trickier because there's mixtures involved in that, but it's doable. And then I think the other one a lot of people overlook and don't really look for collection is mitochondrial DNA. And that's pretty much the hair segment or fragment. There's no root. Almost no labs do it. You have to go out to private sources. And I have a homicide case coming up in March from 1986 that we have mitochondrial DNA on it. I think we had to go to Mitotyping Technologies out in State College, Pennsylvania, is who we were using on that case since like 1990 something, somewhere around there. So the beauty of the mitochondrial DNA is half the profile on the maternal side, and it actually allows for definitive exclusion. You're included by a percentage of the population of there's a whole bunch of words and acronyms after it and all that stuff for the database for the mito, but it actually positively excludes you as a contributor. So it's relatively easy to do, swab a scene. So if we go to a scene and there's wet blood, semen, or saliva, we're literally just using a sterile swab and swabbing it. And it's going to adhere to the cotton. If it's a dry stain, then we're going to end up putting like 1 or 2 drops of sterile water onto the swab tip, swab it, cap it, dry it, and then goes to the state lab or the lab that's going to be doing your DNA testing. It's pretty simple. It's a big Q-tip with a fancy cap. So gloves that are left behind the scene, I want to swab them. So on these, I know when we're doing this case that it has a cloth interior. So it's going to be a good area for a front fingerprint area for doing DNA work. So I do that. So I found it easier. I can't get that swab up inside to get the tip. So I'll do 1 swab per glove. And I'm targeting the front where the fingertips are touching, because then the secretions are left in the fiber and the material there. I have a better chance of getting the DNA skin tags in that area. So pretty much National DNA Index as of June of this year is 26 million profiles nationally. So anytime we're doing DNA work, we do some swabbing, we have it. If we get a profile developed, this is the database that's being searched against, is the national, like that. So remember this number. So everybody likes to talk about DNA. Latent prints are dirty, right? We don't talk about it as much, or on TV do they cover it as much. Because the techniques for dusting for latent prints, I'm using a powder and a brush, and the powder is literally, I'm going to show you a picture of it, it's chimney soot, is really what you're using on a brush. We also use magnetic powder a lot, probably 80%, 75% of the time, we use mag powder over dusting powder, depends on the surface, or vertical, horizontal. Both come in multiple colors, both come as fluorescent. Pretty much we dust for fingerprints, we can photograph with a scale, and then we can still swab it for touch DNA. So if you do fingerprint work first, you always have 2 chances at an ID, because you have the original fingerprint itself if it's viable, then I can swab it for touch DNA afterwards too. So I have 2 chances each time at making it. So if we're doing fingerprint work, we pretty much lift them with a hinge lifter, which I'll show you in a second. It's pretty much 3M packing tape and transparency that a company put together to collect it compared to just tape. Or we use lifting tape, and you can still swab the residue after that if you want. If you do it, and when I say all that, when we're using disposable sterile brushes, and when I use the powder, we actually don't put the brush back into a jar. We actually use it's a sifter top jar, and you put a portion out onto a paper plate. We kind of use it at that scene, and then it's disposed of. So you're not cross-contaminating each scene and dragging it. The only thing with doing the DNA on touch stuff is it's a surface sometimes. You could have multiple touches on that area. So it's not as definitive where you get too complex a mixture sometimes. So pretty much that's the black dusting powder, and what we want to do is we just get a brush. We want to have it kind of loaded where it's dirty like that, kind of just spin it over the surface, and then your powder adheres to the oils or the moistures left behind by the fingerprint. Simple as that, right? So that's one of the most common ways of doing it. The other way we use a lot is we use magnetic powder. Super fine magnetic filings, and then the other thing we do that sometimes in a bigger jar, I'll add like a half a spoon of the powder to it, mix it in together so it's almost like a double coat. But there's a magnetic wand here that we use, so we got to make it like a brush. So when I took a close-up, that's what the metal looks like when you pick it up off the plate. So it actually kind of forms into a brush, and then you same thing, you kind of brush it over the surface for the fingerprints, and you don't want to touch the wand applicator to the surface. You want to have these filings hit, and then after a while they flatten out as you dust. So we dump the mag powder back into the plate and then re-grab it again, and you come up with another brush shape like that. So you do that a couple of times, and within a matter of 10-12 seconds you'll have your fingerprint kind of developed. And then the lifting tape stuff, when I started in the bureau in the 90s, we only had tape. They hadn't had hinge lifters yet available. So you would just kind of put the tape over it, you lift the powder up, and the powder comes up on the tape, and then you transfer. We used to put them on white index cards. Now I go to transparency sheets because nobody else knows what to do with a transparency sheet anymore. But they're like, for a 100-pack, they're still like 20-something, $30. I don't even know they sell them. But I do both, so I make my own cards up, transparencies, if I want to use tape, or this is what a hinge lifter is. And it's basically the two halves. It's a transparency, it's packing tape, and you lift it up, and you fold it again, and you actually seal the fingerprint between the two. I got a picture right here. So this is an actual 2x4 lift. There's a fingerprint right down here, and there's another double layer right here. These were both identified like 2 weeks ago off of a robbery car case I worked. This is actually, this is interesting too, this is lift number 2 of the same fingerprint. It was on a mirror that had cocaine residue and dirt on it. I lifted up lift 1, and it was okay, and I could see the print was still sitting on the mirror, but it was clean now, because I took the disturbance off of it. So then I actually just repowdered the exact same spot, and that's lift number 2. The IDs were made off of lift number 2, not 1, because of too much disturbance in the first one. So you can get a second lift off it sometimes because the residue stays or remains behind. The other one I use too, this is actually a fingerprint and powder off a trigger of a firearm, and that's silicone. My lab was impressed by it too, and I sent it up to them too, because they're like, how'd you do that? And then real quick, the trigger guard interferes with the trigger to try to get a tape or a hinge lifter in there. If you got one shot at it to lay the tape on top of that print, and you're not going to smudge it. So we actually took a hinge lifter backing and put it under the trigger and shaped it as like a form. We put the silicone on top. It oozed over the edges a little bit, but we didn't care because we had like a platform almost like pouring concrete behind it. And then we're able to keep the trigger in good shape, and then we just trimmed off the excess around it, and then we scanned it. And then we put on a scanner. And then the only thing with the scanners when you do a silicone, you have to reverse flip the image because you're looking at it backwards. So other than that, so there's other ways of getting. There's all these different techniques to keep on getting fingerprints. So that's what a fuming chamber looks like. So basically what it is inside we're going to have a little bit of moisture because that helps the fingerprint because it's actually amino acids we're going after when we fume it, and we're using super glue. So it's called cyanoacrylate. It's actually easier super glue. We put the items in here. We have moisture. We literally have like a Honeywell home humidifier in there that it costs $270 for the machine, but I think it's $85 on Amazon. But because it's going in forensic equipment, you pay triple. And we have a hot plate here, literally, and you literally just put a little bit of glue on the hot plate. Once your humidity levels up, it heats up, and the best way I can describe it is you blow a candle out and you watch the smoke at the very end kind of rise up. That's what the super glue does when it's heated. You'll see a very little vapor mist, and then it kind of fills in the chamber, and as it's being distributed by the fan, it coats all the amino touches on the objects. So the nice thing about the chamber is I can put multiple items in the same time, set the fuming. It takes 20 minutes, 6 minutes to purge, so in a half hour I have everything fumed that's from that one case I'm able to throw into the chamber. And then we're going to look at fingerprints, because some items you can see the fingerprints in the super glue or you do other enhancements to it. So this is the actual bottom of a dome light from a stolen car that they ripped out and threw on the ground. My detectives brought it into me. I processed it. That's the palm print. This is from August. So these are the friction ridges of your palm. All the lines that you see in your palm, these are them. And then I kind of just point out to show, like, all the nuances we're looking at in a fingerprint, that's like an island or an enclosure it's called, but that's like a specific part of minutia. And then pretty much the reds here are bifurcations, and then ending ridges are in the blue. Like, see, like there's a good bifurcation here with the fork in the road. So that's the stuff you're looking at when you make the IDs and where they are to each other. The other thing is all these dots, those are the actual individual pores that are secreting the oils, the salts, and the amino acids to make up the fingerprint. And then the beauty is these are actually another form of identification. They're kind of doing them as level 3. The ridge walls are actually unique themselves too. So all this is taken with a 24 megapixel camera with a micro lens, not even a microscope. So there's that much details in it. So that's kind of what we're looking for when we do fingerprint work, is all that type of detail to make the ID. And then this is just a iPad that was put in the fuming chamber and fume. And because it's like the black background, that's it. There's your fingerprint. Comes up that type of quality where we just photograph it as is. We don't dust iPhones or iPads surface because they're oleophobic, oil resistant. You'll swipe the brush 2-3 times and the print's gone. It's in the brush. So so when we do that, that's it. We'll take it with the scale. That's why the scale's in the photo. We take the photo. So I fume a knife. It's like a grayish fume color, so it's hard to see like on silver. So I put black powder on it, and that's the contrast to get your fingerprints. So you can photograph at the scale, or you can lift it with the tape. All right, so this is a double homicide. Not all the evidence fits in the chamber, right? Because it's only 48 by 48. So I got a double homicide, throw the car in the garage, and we actually build our own fuming chamber out inside the garage. And then instead of using the hot plate, I use chemical hot shots, and I put about 6 in here. So we wrap it up where you can keep all the chamber fumes in the chamber. We also throw a 5-gallon bucket of hot water in and let it sit for about 20 minutes, a half hour to put a little bit of moisture in. So when we got done with this one, we lifted actually 42 latent prints off of the vehicle and stuff. So a lot of stuff is you can buy the equipment to do it, but then sometimes you have to make stuff to make it work and kind of, what's going to fit. So this is a piece of glass from a burglary that the detectives brought in. We fumed it. Same thing, the gray powder on glass doesn't show well. So we put black powder on it. It comes in okay, but it's kind of like Morse code. It's not sharp with the ridges. So our next step right on top of it, I spray with basic yellow dye, which is a like fluorescing chemical. It dries a couple minutes, but then we have to put it under blue lights. So it's like a 460 nanometer blue light, and if you filter it with orange goggles, that's our setup with our camera platform. So we have the blue lights all set. If you're going to wear orange goggles to see it, the camera has to have orange goggle too. So the filter goes on the camera. Whatever you're seeing, I can go yellow filter, whatever it is, but it has to match the camera. Then we take the photo. That same fingerprints now end up having more consistent ridges and better lines going across it. So they become more identifiable. On paper, sometimes you can use powder or mag powder right on top of it, but it has to be relatively close to the time it was handled because it starts to absorb into the fibers now. So the main technique, I don't even use the powders, I go right to an anhydrous chemical. You spray it on the object almost till it's saturated, or they dip it, you can dip it in a tray, and you hang it in a heat chamber, or actually you put a steam iron on it, and in about 30 seconds it'll develop the fingerprints. So these are all the fingerprints, the same as you saw in the super glue, but now they're in the purple anhydrous chemical, and those are identifiable too. And on this one, you might sometimes still see a couple of the dots in there. You can see the pores, depends on how detailed it is. There's a lot of ones people miss. This is a fingerprint. That's black electrical tape. That's the adhesive side, the sticky side. So we do that all the time. A lot of times on the grip of a gun, the tape is wrapped around it, so you can untape it, and then you can process the tape for the fingerprint. Or a lot of times, this one in here is from a ATM skimming device. And inside the bar that they put up on the top, they tape the battery pack and so many items to it. So we unravel each piece and process it. And we actually, in this case, for a fact, I know it's out of these. This is a Albanian group out of Brooklyn, New York, that was doing ATM thefts. Once I made the hit and the ID off of that fingerprint, the Secret Service came and took the case away from us. Because that's what federal agencies do to local police departments. Because we pretty much silver plattered the case for them. That's what that case is from. So this way, so most of you in the room, when you got arrested, if you go for an application and stuff like that, or the arrest fingerprint cards, that's what we call a 10-print card. That's what we're looking for. Latent prints that we develop are then searched against the database that contain these, right? So a lot of applications, criminal convictions, military, government employees, is a big database. So that's what a fingerprint looks like, and that detail you saw like in that palm print with the fiction lines of bifurcations, it's all in the fingerprint too. Bifurcations up top here, bifurcations all over the place, deltas, All the above, right? That's the stuff we're looking at for the detail. All on a fingerprint. It's rolled properly. Oh, wait a second, what? Next generation, the FBI database, NGI, has how many?
179.
All right, what was our other number? I said remember the number?
26.
Okay. Math time. 170 million fingerprints, 26. So you pretty much have a 6.5 times better chance of making a fingerprint ID than you do with DNA. Except for anything I've heard over the last 10 years just talks about DNA. They forget the fingerprint part. So any type of crime scene processing you do, and everything I do, and what I teach is, you do all your fingerprint work first, and then DNA supplements it. Not that you don't do the DNA work, but you don't know where you're swabbing because you're swabbing blindly if you just start swabbing. And I didn't put it up here, but a great example is a 28-foot ladder. We had at like a Best Buy commercial burglary where they stole like 80,000 and they left the ladder. The detective swabbed it. He said he swabbed it. I measured it out because I process it for fingerprints. There's 476 linear feet on a 28-foot ladder. Because there's two halves, there's all the side frame, there's all the rungs, all that type of stuff. When you get all done, that's how big it is. So he missed, I actually found fingerprints on the ladder, but he never swabbed that area because he blind swabbed. So if you do the fingerprint work first, you should always supplement it with DNA. All right, this guy's dead. And I know the doc here is talking about doing the unidentified also, because that's, she'll explain more, but it's their case. We find it, whatever we got at that point, once the ME takes the body, it's their case. We end up doing work with them, but technically they're responsible for it, correct?
It's my crime scene.
Correct. It's theirs from there on, and also the case is yours until you're able to identify it. So Norwalk City, Norwalk's out on Long Island Sound. So this fellow was found washed up ashore of one of our islands in 1996. So facial recognition, no. Teeth, no. ME estimates out floating around maybe 8 to 10 months in the water. That's his, see his muscles? Now you get it? It's like a muscle, like a shellfish.
Yeah. Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
So back in '96, we had to ink a finger. We used to just take bolt cutters and you'd lop off the section, because if you have, he probably doesn't have any rigor anymore and stuff like that, but it's just easier to manipulate it. Or we actually had the early Botox in our cadaver kits. It was like the big Frankenstein needle that you'd inject it under the layers to try to plump it up to try to get it, so you could roll it. So they actually inked it on a middle finger. This is probably about 4 or 5 years ago. They're down in glycerol jars still, which they probably worked maybe for the first 3 or 4 years preserving them, but now they've turned into like Vienna sausages. They're pretty much done. But you got to do what you got to get a fingerprint, right? Whatever it takes. I think that's a whole train hit. So they're going to make the ID and all that stuff. Rolling fingerprint still does it. So on that case I was showing you with the fellow out here, 1996, Connecticut APHIS, like the fingerprint systems, they weren't really connected to each state. So you had to search them almost manually state by state. So we did Connecticut, no hit. Then they drove the print over to New York, had them put on the New York machine, no hit. And then they sent it to FBI, which was called IAPHIS back then, no hit. Back in 2014, I go to a training class, I start looking into, I get taught about NGI, I'm like, hey, can you run it through? So the FBI runs it through, no hit. 2016, I run it through again, no hit. 2016, our state lab in Connecticut, we took whole pubic hair, ran a full DNA profile, perfect, from the hair, from the root, searched it into National and Connecticut CODIS, no hit. No, so we got a perfect profile, but no DNA hit. 2012, I contact my guys at the print unit. I said, yeah, we'll run it through again, because the algorithms have gotten so good in the last 3 years. The search is better. On the 12th of February, I get a call back 2 days later. We got your guy. We had a hit on a fingerprint from your own department arrest 3 years earlier. But like the algorithms got so good, it could read the print better and better. And I actually identified who he was. through the fingerprint, never reported missing to this day, and stuff like that. But that case was never going to be solved through DNA because he's not in any database. So, and this is overlooked also, is casting impressions. Nobody does like shoe prints or tire tracks, because again, it takes a lot of time and work. So I show you this real quick. This is biofoam. We use this to take the exemplar. We catch the suspect, or we think we have the suspect, and we want to do the shoe comparison. We can end up using a biofoam where we put the shoe impression in here, and then we cast it with lab stone, dental stone. Simple as that. So all I really do is I make the lab stone, dental stone almost into like pancake batter, pour it in, and usually about 45 minutes it cures, where it's pretty much, we remove it, and we end up with that. And then if you had a cast in dirt from the scene, then the lab would end up comparing the two to see if they can make an ID. You would end up with a class characteristic as far as the impression is a work boot or a sneaker or something, but then the lab would do the individual identification of any nuances in the sole. And the same thing if I'm out in the winter, in the snow, it's hard to see the detail. I simply just put gray primer paint on it. I'll do like a layer at a time, photograph it, another layer, photograph it until I get it to how I want it. And then same thing, so if it's snow, it makes it show better.
Wow.
If you do some type of contrast to it. Then a lot of my work I do too is ballistics, and it's NIBIN is the ATF database for the firing pin and breech face markings. So your breech face markings are these lines here, and then your firing pin here, and then your drag ramp. But this is just a photo using a 24 megapixel camera. Microscopically, this stuff looks like the moon when you start looking at it, and that's what the computers use to match a casing recovered at the scene with the firearm that fired it. So that's NIBIN. And on this one here, anyway, zoom in, it shows it. So you're looking at the nuance, but this one actually has rings on the tip of the firing pin. So never mind all the other markings and striations that you can do, but this one actually has rings that I'm not even focused in on. I'm focused on up here, but it catches the beginning of the rings. And on some of them, if you zoom down into it, you can count the number of rings on the tip of the firing pin to help with the ID. Let's see if this plays. Yes. No sound?
May not have.
Yeah. I hear it. It wants to. No. Maybe I'll help you on that. You'll watch it. So this is a pistol recovered that has a Glock switch on the back of it, which alters it to a full automatic pistol. So I have 15 rounds in this. I'm going to watch how fast I fire 15 rounds out of a pistol. One trigger pull. So I did another one where I fired it. I don't have that video, but I was able to shoot 17 rounds in 0.98 seconds. One trigger pull, that's how fast. That's what a Glock switch does on the firearms that are out on the streets that are being converted. The other thing too is I think you can see it here. It actually comes pretty good in this screen. You see the coral blue in this area here? That's Blue Star. We use it for blood detection at the scenes where it's not visible to you because it might be on black leather, which actually it is in this case. So this is a stabbing case I had years ago. It was on Thanksgiving, but when we processed the car and we got it, they had cleaned up the back seat. But where this blue here is, that's the actual strap where the seatbelt plugs into. And actually it shows it because he couldn't clean up all the fabric. We had it in the stitching. Then I'm able to swab that area where it's blue and get the DNA from the blood because it wasn't all cleaned up or removed. So it's a blood detection. So luminol is another one that's common that a lot of people use. Luminol has to be almost pitch black to see it. Blue Star is in my garage with some like daylight coming in from the door. I had some stains on here. I sprayed it, and you can see the coral blue here. That's the reaction to the hemoglobin, which I just like to say that, in human blood. And it only reacts also to bear and weasel blood.
Wow.
So I've been doing this for a long time. I have not had a bear or a weasel as a suspect, so I'm going to go with human.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going to go. But that helps you detect it and find it. Then pretty much I do our own serial number restorations, other guns. We photo it, sand it, clean it, acid, and then we just do it in each layer as necessary to find it, and we photograph it because you go too far. So you do a set, photograph it, do a set, photograph it, make sure you don't lose it. So this one was recovered in Long Island Sound by a clamor. So that's sitting out in salt water. We don't know how long until we do the work. So remember of the frame. So that's where we start to sand and do the acid work, right? And then we came up with the serial number, and it was 8 years been out there from a car burglary, and they must have thrown it in the water. So even sitting in the salt water that long, we're able to recover the serial number for the gun. Typically, we get this turned over to us, and sometimes within a day, half hour, 15 minutes, I get that. So it's just a process of sanding, cleaning, acid. It's a Fry's reagent is the acid we use, but that's on steel. We also have acid for aluminum and copper. There's not a lot of copper guns, but we do aluminum ones. And steam photography, I'll go through real quick. So auto mode with a flash really doesn't work at nighttime. I'll show you some examples. Manual mode settings way too complicated. That's more for artistic work because you're doing too many adjustments, and at 2:30 in the morning and 12 degrees out, I'm not doing that many adjustments, and I'm moving around facing the other way, so I'm not resetting. So pretty much program mode is what I use on the camera at nighttime, and I'm setting the exposure value to tell the camera I want more light, right? And just the lens stays open longer. So real quick, I'll read the numbers. This is auto with a flash, right? And it's only like 1/60th of a second. And see your flash is only about 12 feet out, 15 feet from the camera. But if I go to program mode and I go to 0, now the lens is open 1.6 seconds. And you start to pick up more details, especially I want to see this wall more. Then I go to +1 on the EV. Now it's open 3 seconds. I start to pick up way more detail. Now I'm at a +2, 6 seconds it stays open. It goes, and for 6 seconds it stays open, absorbing all that light. Then it closes, and then I see if that's what I like. And I'm going to go way over the top here. That's a 3. That's 13 seconds. But a 9 p.m. scene, I can make it look like it's 3 in the afternoon to show my evidence. Usually I shoot like around a +1.7. Somewhere around there is a pretty good number at night because they usually have a street light around. So this is an actual scene. So I show this because there's a crash here, but this isn't even a crash. There's a crash of a red car over here. That's the initial crash, and then this car crashes into the police cars.
Oh,
So this is auto mode from the perimeter, taking an overall shot. I'm going to shoot the next shot in program mode, watch all the buildings and everything around the pier. So I did nothing except for turn the dial on top of the camera. That's it. Just using, you're buying $2,000 cameras, which actually you really shouldn't. You should be buying a $900 camera because the 2000 ones have too many buttons. But knowing to use, it's a microprocessor inside, so use it to make things happen. So, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit, so I put them up here. Some of your good sources for doing research for writing, for TV stuff, the Forensic Files is pretty good because it's quasi-documentary. So it's pretty good as far as how they work their way through the case and what science they use. I get a subscription to Forensic Mag, which kind of is like a newsletter subscription. It kind of just gives you little updates as far as what happens or a case is solved. Especially, they do a lot of cold case and they do a lot of forensic genealogy. They'll post and stuff like that. So it's kind of good to see how cases are getting solved. The best crime scene and witness training probably is My Cousin Vinny. Because if you think about it, if you'll watch it differently once you kind of think about it, but he kind of breaks down the witnesses of their credibility, right? How they could see where they were, how long you cooked grits for, and stuff like that. But they also go through the tire tracks.
Yes.
What car could, like the investigations, what car could have left the duel? What car has the posi rear-ended and stuff like that? So there's a lot to that one. And then this is the world's greatest investigator known to man, is Columbo. Because he just methodically works through every investigation, and then he gets at the end with just one more thing, ma'am.
Yes.
And then turns around and you just fold and you tell the whole case to him. But he's a real good one to watch him work through the case methodically, not be in a hurry, and zip through it. So that's all I got.
Okay, great. All right, so this question is going to go to, there's some that are focused on one person and then the others are free for all, so just jump in if you're ready. Let me ask this very broad question. How did you decide upon this present career, or how did you come into your present role? How did you get here? Anyone?
I'll take a break.
All right. I read a book called Dead Men Do Tell Tales, which is about a forensic anthropologist, Dr. William Maples, and some of the cases that he helped to solve using forensic anthropology. I think I read it when I was like 12, 13. My aunt actually gave it to me. And I was always very interested in science and mysteries and puzzles and just using that type of thinking to get at problems. So I learned about the broader field of forensics and just started devouring books that had forensics in the title. About the time that I was going into medical school, it clicked. Oh, I can do forensic pathology as a physician. So I basically spent my whole entire 13-year-long training period knowing that's what I wanted to do, which was a challenge because pathologists are known as weird. We like to sit in the corner of the basement with our microscopes. We have no people skills. So when I see that, or I still remember this Law and Order episode where the medical examiner on the scene, who I guess was supposed to be the doctor or maybe the investigator, I don't know, said something kind of not appropriate about the decedent, and she goes, "Oh, sometimes I forget they're people." No, I never forget they're people. So my microscope sits over here with my dust cover on it, so I use it when I need it, but most of it I'm using these for. And if I was not good at talking to people, I'd be terrible at my job because I talk to families, lawyers, both defense, civil prosecutors, detectives and law enforcement, other forensic professionals. I'm our deputy chief, so I talk to our department head, the stakeholders that pay the bills. They explain that, dead people don't vote, but it's still important to have a quality death investigation system.
And so, yeah. I'll go next. So I got into forensic science by mistake, or maybe I should say by accident, because it wasn't a mistake, but it was not my intention. I do not like puzzles. I do not like mysteries. I don't like true crime. I don't watch any of those TV shows. My kind of motivation in high school and then in college was to be an archaeologist. That's all I cared about was archaeology. And, I did my undergraduate degree in classical and Near Eastern archaeology, which means that I studied like the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians. And I worked as an archaeologist here in New Jersey. There's a type of archaeology called cultural resource management. So we're the ones that delay all the construction projects. So before a construction project has to happen, they have to have the archaeologists out to see what sort of impacts that construction could have on any cultural resources. So, the remains of a town from the 1800s or Native American material or whatever it may be. So I did that out of college and I loved that work. But one day I was driving home, it was July, it was about 95 degrees outside. I'd been working outside in the hot sun all day long in like tick-infested fields with poison ivy everywhere. I was hot, I was sweaty, I was covered in dirt, and I was driving home to like go take a nap and have a shower, actually in the reverse order, take a shower, then have a nap. And there was a billboard advertising for school bus drivers. It was, it was getting close to the school year, so I guess they were recruiting. And the billboard was advertising $11.50 an hour. This is in 2000, 2001. $11.50 an hour, full benefits. And here I was, a college grad with a fancy degree and the fancy student loans to go with it, and I was making $9.50 an hour and no benefits in a very physically demanding, semi-hazardous profession. And so I realized this is a lot of fun in being 21, 22 and doing this work, but this is not something I can be doing when I'm 41 or 42. So I decided to go to graduate school, and I was looking for kind of a skill set, something that would be good any part of the world, any time period. And I'd had an experience as a study abroad student when I was doing my undergraduate. I'd gone to the UK for the whole year to study abroad. So I was looking kind of, in other countries as well for this degree. And I found this master's degree, and it was called Forensic Archaeological Science. Doesn't that sound really cool? I thought it sounded really cool, but I didn't know what forensic science was. I thought I was just going to be learning how to excavate dead people. And I thought, great, this is a great skill set. There's always dead people in archaeology. It doesn't matter where you are or what time period. So great, this is what I'm looking for. And so I went over to the UK. It was just weeks after 9/11. And I actually really struggled because they were calling up archaeologists to help with Ground Zero and the human remains recovery, which was kind of what I was going to school to go do. And also there were a lot of challenges with just getting out of the country, communication abroad, all the rest of it. But I decided to, just go ahead and start my program. And on the very first day of class, I realized my error. These were not ancient dead people. These were very recently deceased individuals, and forensic science had to do with the intersection of science and the criminal justice system. But it was the best mistake I could have possibly made, because one of my frustrations with archaeology is I very much have a science mindset and a data, evidence-driven mindset. And there's not a lot of that always in archaeology. Sometimes it's just whoever makes the best argument on, pretty flimsy actual data or evidence. And so forensic science really appeased my desire to do science, and like archaeology, it's super multidisciplinary. You need to know a little bit about a lot of different things to do your job well. So it really satisfied a lot of kind of career hungers that I had. For a long time, I thought that I had put archaeology behind me, that I was just now full in forensic science. My 1 year of graduate school in the UK turned into 9 years of living in the UK and working with lawyers over there and crime scene and doing cases and stuff like that. So it definitely took my life in a very different direction. But when I came back to the United States in 2010, I got pulled into a number of traditional archaeological projects, and probably the biggest one really brought together both archaeology and forensic science. In 2017, I was responsible for the excavation of a historic cemetery in Philadelphia that was being impacted by construction. They were literally throwing the bodies away when nobody was looking. And in the end, we excavated 500 burials. There's still probably another 1,500 still in the ground at the site. But that was a great kind of culmination of what I thought I was going to do versus what I ended up doing in my career.
Wow, that's quite a journey. My goodness.
I was in med school. I lived right there.
So, Art, you want to tell us how you end up doing what you're doing?
No, I don't know what happened. Just real short, as a detective, we pretty much process our own crime scenes, and I became very good at latent print work, developing it, knowing how to develop it. So we just pretty much did our own scenes, and then you just kind of get on-the-job training as you go. I'm not going to talk too much about my education because my wife is here too. I went to a couple of colleges over the years. I don't have a single criminal justice class or forensic class ever taken. I have a history degree, and pretty much everything else is on-the-job training, certifications through the years of fingerprint work and stuff like that. And an opening came up over in our crime scene ID unit, and I kind of just fit. And then from there, just kept on doing the work.
He's third generation.
Yeah, I'm third.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I mean, that's, for the job. And also, my father and grandfather are out of the Bronx,
Yeah.
New York. So I kind of, followed in the police end of it. But I started out in narcotics for the first 6.5 years, and then became a detective. So I kind of just, to get the crime scene stuff, I kind of just morphed into it.
Clearly, you showed an early aptitude.
Yeah, I did okay.
So when do you look at a case, Art? Like when does every crime come to your attention? Do specific crimes come to your attention? How do you get involved?
So every department might be a little bit different of their protocols. So I only usually go out for major crimes, which would be like in Connecticut, a Class A felony, maybe some Bs, or something unusual that they need assistance with. So the detectives will handle like the burglaries and stuff like that. I usually go out with death scenes and shootings, infant deaths. I'll go out for to assist, suicide.
Pathologist, it just means you're a licensed physician. All of the counties, except for one county, actually have a forensic pathologist that is working as their medical examiner. So a forensic pathologist is the most specific way to describe me, a MD or DO who has done a pathology residency and also a forensics fellowship. So same medical school as the cardiologists, as the GI docs, neurologists, neurosurgeons. So we start with the tree trunk, the doctors, and then basically the branches of the tree are all the different fields of medicine: internal medicine, pediatrics, psychiatry, pathology, and then you start branching off into your subspecialties. That internal medicine doctor will do cardiology, GI, renal. Pathology has all sorts of different types of specialists where you can be a cytopathologist where you look at cells, you can run the blood bank, you can run the clinical labs, and then forensic pathology is a little branch off of that. So yes, obviously I've been training a long time to get here. Other systems that are coroner-based systems, sometimes the coroner acts as the chief medical legal investigator. What does that mean? So we get, in my 3 counties, about 4,200 deaths reported to us. I can't take all of those phone calls, right? I can't go to those scenes. So we have professional death investigators who are either criminal justice, biology background, forensic science background, that take those phone calls, those death reports, screen them based on certain criteria that we have to investigate further, and then if there is a death at the scene, a residence, outside, wherever, they actually go and act as my eyes and ears on scene and interface with law enforcement, much like our setting. So I actually know that the current chief medical examiner of Connecticut was working when I trained in New York City, so I know him well. I was actually just hanging out with him last Tuesday. Dr. Gill, yeah, won a prestigious award. He's great. So Connecticut is a state system, right? So all the exams are done by that office, but the investigators are all throughout the state. So, and different offices have different capabilities, jurisdictions. Big city offices tend to, like New York City, they have 5 boroughs, so they used to have an office in each borough. So it just kind of depends where you're at. Do not call your forensic pathologist coroners. No disrespect to the coroners, but it's like when you call one of my friends who's the same age as me, the pediatrician. Oh, are you the nurse? No disrespect to the nurse. But
Can I add a little something to that? So the coroner system comes from the UK.
Yeah.
In the UK, the coroner is a judge, and there's a specialized coroner's court. So whenever there is kind of a questionable death, there's an inquest, and the coroner will hear from the pathologist, they might hear from the other investigators, and then the coroner actually makes a decision, a judgment, as to the nature of that death. And that's a semi-similar system is what came over to the United States when we were a colony, and it's obviously changed a lot from that original system. In the UK, for every post-mortem, every autopsy, they have 2 attending pathologists, and they have to come to a consensus before they file their report. Now,
so when I'm doing the exam, what am I determining? So I'm a physician. I do the same basic practice, right? I ask for subjective information. So if you go see the doctor, hey, how you been feeling lately? Obviously, I can't get that from my patients, but I can ask, their family, how, what happened, or I can get that subjective information from law enforcement. We found this person dead under a tree. Objective, that would be my autopsy, right? My findings. And then my diagnosis is called the cause of death and the manner of death. So the cause of death is what specific disease or injury or combination of the two that led to someone's life to end. And that's good. It's a diagnosis, physician, great. Manner, I have a love-hate relationship with. Manner is basically a statistical shorthand to explain how the circumstances or how the death came to be, right? And it's meant for death certificate data. It's meant for public health. It's not meant for crime or court. But a lot of times, medical examiner calls it a homicide. Okay, that doesn't mean it's a murder or an involuntary manslaughter or voluntary manslaughter. It simply means to me that the death occurred in the hands of another. So I could have been fighting with somebody when we're both drunk and I accidentally or unintentionally push you off a ledge into the water and you drown. Well, if but for me doing that, it's a homicide. If it's a law enforcement involved shooting, could be justified. But again, if but for that person pulling the trigger, the person would still be alive. So I was laughing, we have a joke. We're so sick of being screamed at by families over manners that we say, bring back the inquest. We would love to have an inquest, take me out of it. Here's the medical side of things. But sometimes there's either they're like, why are you calling this a suicide? Because I think that the prescription medication that she was given had a black box warning that led to it's again, that's so many different little details. That's not how it works. Yes.
But undetermined could be changed later on with more evidence.
Excellent point. So both cause of death and manner are opinions, okay? So a perfectly, or another one of my colleagues, or either personally or professionally out in the field, can review a death and may have a different opinion or a different way of wording that cause of death. And they may have a different opinion on the manner. And that's okay. What do doctors do? They disagree and get second opinions, but unfortunately in the legal system, we're pitted against each other, which it's not really like that. But yes, if we get more info, and our own opinion in our own case is the opinion based on all of the available information at that time. Yeah. If additional things, yes, I can change the manner or the cause, or if there's additional scientific developments. So if we have a lot of sudden unexplained deaths in young healthy people that we can't really understand, and now we have more access to genetic testing, and some of those deaths could be retested and actually may have a long QT syndrome, something that's an inherited arrhythmogenic disorder, which means that your heart is more likely to go into irregular heartbeat and die. For whatever reason, all of my post-mortem EKGs were flatline. I must be doing them wrong. But I can only see alterations in structure, right? So the heart's too big, your arteries are narrow, you've got a lung infection, you've got cirrhosis. I can't see alterations in function, right? So I can't see if your heart is pumping properly. I can't see if you have some type of if you have diabetes and you're in some type of metabolic state, sometimes I can tell, sometimes I can't. So,
but it's still this. Unfortunately, having flatline patients, is limiting. But you have done a lot of autopsies. But I'm trying to figure out: does every death get autopsy? The certain deaths, or what is the trigger that requires an autopsy?
Okay, so it's based on statute in the states, and the type of system that you have is based on where you're at. But then also the types of deaths that get reported and have to be reported to that death investigation system, whatever type. There's a lot of commonalities, but there are a few unique circumstances. So it's basically any sudden or any unnatural death, right? So suicides, homicides, car accidents, anything that is an unnatural reason for somebody's life to end. That's a medical examiner case. We also do have sudden unexplained deaths in people that were otherwise apparently healthy, because there are some genetic issues or some congenital, like heart diseases that don't present until later on in life. Our state, New Jersey, has anyone under the age of 18 needs to report it to us. And when I say report, that's not the same thing as doing an autopsy and investigating that case further. So report is my investigator. They review it. If they feel like there's a natural death, there's an explanation for what happened. The person has a physician. They've seen, an old person died at home. Right. That gets reported to our office. But we say, oh, yep, they have known heart disease. There's nothing suspicious, so we don't need to go any further. I just did our annual statistics. I think it's about 20? Yeah, like about 25% of deaths that occur in my 3 counties get reported to me. Okay. A lot of deaths happen in a hospital. People are sick, so we don't need to be involved. Of those, we bring in about 60% of those cases, or like a little under, give or take. Yeah. Okay. So then of those, and those are the ones that are clearly not natural, or we don't know what it is. It could be natural, I just have no idea. And of those cases that we bring into our office, we do perform autopsies on 2/3 of them. So last year it was about 900 for my office. We're the second largest regional office in New Jersey. So when we're talking about homicides and all the interesting cases, that's only about 50 cases a year, 50 to 60 cases a year in my office that are classified as homicides. So it's really like a small subset.
Fraction of a fraction.
A fraction of a fraction, yeah. And I really, first and foremost, think of myself as a public health physician. My reason for existing is to figure out why people aren't living as long as they should be. Yeah. And violent deaths, be it, a tox report there that had heroin, fentanyl, probably some alcohol, a whole bunch of stuff in there. And I went, look, drug overdose, you guys are doctors too. And they went, yeah, this is so easy. And I said, this guy was stopped at a traffic light, sitting on his motorcycle, doing absolutely nothing wrong when another car came up behind him and had nothing to do with his death. Like maybe he was wobbly a little bit, but you have to interpret that information in the context of the case.
Where would somebody buy enough cadmium, arsenic, cyanide? Who would sell it?
Where do you buy it? Where do you buy it?
Story and not for
Right. No.
She's poisoning.
I don't know.
I'm just continuing the
pharmacist.
You Google
I got some rats in my barn I got to take care of.
conversation
It was on Google.
Yeah, the dark web.
DIY.
Yeah, you can Google it.
Yeah. Make sure you use your credit card when you do that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that I am on several watch lists because I have Googled some things as for professional education and learning.
Scary.
Or I'm very fun at cocktail parties because I'm like, hey, here's the works. Look at that. Do you know what that is?
And then first of all, you go over to your colleague's computer that's open,
Yeah.
you do the search there, and then return to your desk.
That's correct. That's correct.
But yeah, depending what industry somebody is in,
Yes.
like
The cyanide guy, he was a jeweler. They use it
He's
for
a
cleaning.
jeweler.
Yes, see, he read the book.
He had access and
I have my office in the chemistry department of the building that I have my office in. And so I have access to all kinds of chemicals that, that not only could be poisonous in their own right, but could be mixed in certain ways to create bad things.
That's right. So books are full of this, TV series, movies. From Father Cadfael, Ellis Peters wrote this wonderful series where you have this medieval monk, and he's figuring things out using, plants and little seedlings and flowers of tiny periwinkles and things like that. I think we have Murdoch Mysteries where it's like the turn of the century maybe, and they're figuring out it's the beginning of forensic science. I would say the Sherlock Holmes canon actually starts.
Yes.
The first page of the first book starts with Sherlock Holmes trying to figure out a reagent for blood. Like if I can tell that this is blood and it's human blood, that's literally how the entire all the 56 stories starts, right?
Yes.
So do you have stories about that? Do you have a hot button or pet peeve that has to do with how people are represented, how you are represented.
Well, I wanted so the weird poison stuff. The book called The
Yeah.
Poisoner's Handbook.
Yeah.
Really good. I met the author.
Oh, poisoners.
The Poisoner's Handbook. And what's really amazing about that is it tells the story of the first like real forensic toxicologist, Charles Kepler, I think. And you know, I was in not the actual building that they worked in, but we were in front of I think it was Dr. Norris's, one of the first chief medical examiners of New York City, the first chief. We would have our conference in front of his picture. And just seeing all the different like causes of death and things that were out there that they had collected over the years as things have evolved. So the history of forensics in medicine is very interesting.
So pet peeves, Art, do you have a pet peeve?
So the only thing from watching the shows and stuff like that, which I always find very stupid, is the scene is shut down until the crime scene investigator gets there. Like the initial officers go, they see what they got, they back out, shut it down, it's hell. When I get there, we take a quick look and whatever, then we're gonna usually start with photography, right? Document the scene as we find it. We don't have 6 people walking through the scene and the rooms while the flash is going off. So whenever I see the photographer shooting shots and there's other investigators crisscrossing behind them, and that is one pet peeve. And then the other one real quick are Tyvek suits.
Oh, yeah.
So I watch an outdoor scene where the crime scene investigators are wearing a Tyvek suit, which I don't know if you ever wore one in June or July or August.
Yeah, they're sweaty.
The last thing I actually do is wear clothing underneath it, but you have to. And then I watch them walking through the scene with the investigators with nothing on, just suits. So if you think it's that important that you're worried about dropping hairs and fibers, that you're wearing a Tyvek suit at an outdoor scene where everybody in the world has been to in New York City, why are you wearing a Tyvek suit? Because it's stupid. It's overkill. I think they do a lot of it for TV work.
Yeah.
That way if they're photographed, I had my Tyvek suit, but I tied it around my waist with my top half exposed because it was too hot and all that. Tyvek suit, you didn't make an arrest. I can't answer that because every case is different and there's all different reasons. Some investigators are better investigators. Some evidence is better. They knew what to do with the evidence. Evidence recognition, like what's valuable.
If you don't collect it,
Yeah, like if you didn't know to collect it, you can't test it. Like so, it's a whole.
so that's an important thing for me is I collect evidence. Yeah, so I have to have a high index of suspicion. So if I'm just looking at a case, I'm like, oh, another druggie, okay, whatever, just doing the autopsy, not going to find anything, wait till the tox comes back. I have to, I like to call it Dr. Thoma scale of danger. So I start up here and then I convince myself it's okay. Because even we do things in a very methodical way. So our first pictures are always the same. So we have the seal number on the body bag showing for chain of custody with what case number it is. Then we open the bag. We do exactly as the remains came in. Because if I was just throwing stuff over here, hosing the body down, I'm washing away trace evidence, DNA, like all of that stuff. So I have to collect things, and maybe it never gets tested, and that's fine. I'm collecting and documenting, and I'm like,
But you have it. You have it.
I have it. And law enforcement might be like, okay, well, we don't need that, or we need this later, or whatever, but you have to have that thought in your mind that you need to collect it.
It's a very technical term. It's called an onion.
Yes.
An
Yeah.
onion.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
peel the onion.
You gotta start overall on the outside and you work your way in.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it like that, you went past layers to try to get the bones or the gun in the car,
Yeah.
but didn't do the fingerprint DNA work on the door handles and everything going in, there's no such
You
process.
can't do it over.
So you
Correct.
cannot over collect.
That's
You
correct.
never know when
That
you
is
might
correct.
need that evidence
Correct.
in the future.
But I think you also need to see the big picture.
Yeah.
when we're speaking.
And everything, and everything
well.
labeled, yeah.
Yes.
Would a gunman run the scene and not try to retrieve the casings from the bullet?
Oh,
So
you want smart criminals.
No, thank
Oh.
God. No, they're mostly
There's-
dumb.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a good story. This is
Okay,
called
story.
somebody was caught by the millennial anti-theft device.
Wait, say that again?
The millennial he knows what it is. Millennial
Yeah.
anti-theft device. I'll explain that in a minute. So it was a guy who was planning to set up his pot dealer. The guy had a really
dealer.
pot dealer.
Okay.
Back when it wasn't legal in New Jersey.
Ah,
I guess there's less of this.
yes.
So he lured the guy in, shot him, disposed of his body, but he had the murder victim's car, this pesky car.
Oh.
He went to get in the car. Oh crap, I can't drive stick. Okay. So he calls up his friend. He says, hey bud, you can drive stick, right? Yeah. So my friend left this car here. I just need you to move it somewhere else away from my house. Is that okay? Yeah, no problem. So then a couple of days later, he was watching the news and he's like, oh, the friend that moved the car. I recognize that car.
I moved that
moved
car.
that car. Mom, because they were like
Yeah.
college kids. Mom, I think I aided
Yeah.
and abetted in a homicide. And that's how they caught him. The millennial anti-theft units. They were the Brookdale,
there's almost-
Brookdale college students.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
I taught some of them and
stolen
yeah.
standard cars.
Yeah.
There's no stolen.
Very, very little of the stolen cars are actually stick shift cars.
Yeah.
It's all-
Yeah, because nobody can.
Yeah.
My kid's gonna be like, I don't even know what a gas car is.
Well, I think you have to pay extra now if you order a standard stick shift car. It's like now that costs extra when it used to be the
Correct.
automatic cost.
Correct. Yeah, my husband
Yeah.
gave up on that because
Yeah.
he couldn't get one.
Yeah. So we talked about cold cases. Now our protagonists, even the TV protagonists, they obsess about unsolved cases.
Yeah.
And do you have any cases that bother
Yes.
you and keep you up? Go ahead.
Okay. When I first started my current job in 2014, one of my forensic techs gave me a Weird New Jersey. Okay, do you know what
I know Weird New Jersey.
Okay.
I love Weird New
So
Jersey.
it was a book that was like New Jersey's most notorious cases or whatever. And basically in the middle, and maybe you have it here, there were 3 cases that were unidentified people. It was Princess Doe, the Tiger Lady, and a guy that was in a barrel in Marlboro, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this going, oh man, this one's from the 70s, this is from the 80s, this is 2002. These are never going to be solved. Ever, 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 ever. Well, it might have been like 21 or 20. Yeah, within the last 5 years, every single one of those has been identified from forensic genetic genealogy. And the guy from Marlboro in the thing, I gave him his name back. Yes. So they called and they were like, yeah, his like 4th cousin put in their DNA and they linked it all back and they found the mom. And I didn't talk to the family. I talked to the prosecutor's detective that was working with them. And this is a lot, I'm kind of in the background, you don't like see me. But he went missing. So many people go missing and aren't reported missing. So he went missing in like 2001. They were like, we haven't heard from him. He's probably deceased, but we don't know. And she was living now, I think, in like Georgia or somewhere down south. And she was able to go up and see where he was buried as an unidentified unknown person, and she had closure. So that was pretty awesome. And I also there's a case that wasn't, or it was briefly reported. She went missing in 1974. Never reported missing. Found skeletal remains in 1988. And they forensic genetic genealogy identified her, I think, in 2021. I also signed that because as soon as they're identified, they need an updated death certificate. So like that, I'm so excited about fake testing.
And here in New Jersey at Ramapo College,
Yes,
we
yes.
have the Center for Investigative Genetic Genealogy, and it's a professor and 2 members of staff. They are just the nicest people in the world. Like, in our line of business, you meet a lot of forensic people that are kind of jerks, but these people are really nice.
Invent a name?
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's gotten better.
Okay.
All the young ones.
But yeah, these people are genuinely wonderful folks that really are living the mission, and through this center, they're able to provide free services to law enforcement for these cold cases, and we've had a lot of closures because of the work that they do.
Yeah, it's a game changer. I heard about the Golden State Killer. I'm like, this will change forensic science
Yes.
permanently.
You were able to identify the bodies, but could you also determine their cause of death and the killer?
You are appointed my assistant because I was going to ask that. Perfect question.
So let's see. I think in I think one of those cases, they know who is probably involved that I talked about. My case, I haven't heard anything, but they were making it an active investigation. Again, so determining why somebody died, my job, who did it, it's not that I don't care, it's just like, not my circus, not my monkeys. Sometimes you can have, like I have people who I know what their cause of death is because they're not decomposed or skeletal or what have you. They're just completely unidentified, right? So it depends on the case.
Great question.
Yes.
I'm really interested in this religious restriction for doing an autopsy. So if someone's poisoned and they're in one of these religious communities, are there other tells if you can't do an autopsy to figure out how they were murdered or what poison, if they were poisoned and what poison it was?
So poison is kind of a catch-all term. So toxicology looks for a lot of things. It can't search for everything. And there are some things that I don't test for, like ethylene glycol, antifreeze. Don't use that to kill your spouses, but like unless I, you know,
They just had that in Ridgefield, Connecticut. The ex-wife was arrested. Literally 2 weeks ago.
Unless I have a high index of suspicion, and I did actually have a case. It was suicide, but I'm like, I don't understand. She's got nothing. What happened? And then because I didn't know what happened, I put in, and I didn't find a cause of death. I put in tissue samples. And I'm thinking like, I'm an idiot, like I can't figure this out. And my one colleague's like, did you polarize the kidneys looking for crystals? And I'm like, oh God, I should know this by now. And I did. I was like, son of a gun, got the tox testing and it was ethylene glycol.
So you can do a toxicology test on without doing doing an autopsy.
Yes, our objection form says we're still going to take some tox.
Is the most interesting or unusual case maybe that you want to talk about? And by the way, if something is still ongoing, I'm told we're not going to talk about that. Right?
I mean, so I am very, very fascinated by List, the Long Island serial killer.
Yes.
And not just because, what the heck, but because I was actually in New York City when they went hunting for Shannon Gilbert and found all of those unexpected people. And because I like bones, I was hanging out with a forensic anthropologist. They're more fun than the regular kids, and they kept going out, and I'm like, what are you doing out there? How are you tripping over all of, like, it's crazy. So and then I'd watch the news and be like, hey Brad, I saw you, ha ha ha. So, and I actually also, they would, because they like me, because I like bones. So they were like, oh, come down and see what we're working on. And so I saw some of those actual remains in person, right? And I saw some of the ones that were from a previous victim that had been dismembered. And so I'm like, oh, they're never going to find this guy, you know. And so when that story broke, I'm just in there like, what is going, absolutely fascinated, right? So multiple. I'm not investigating it, but I have personal timelines. And then I'm also thinking, oh my God, how many bodies are out there? I was teasing Anna. She's like, I'm in the Highlands. I'm like, don't trip over.
Scary.
La la la.
There can be that many. Cool. Other cases? Anyone want to suggest? Particularly interesting?
I've got a few, but maybe I'll talk about a case that I didn't work on. Actually, I don't want to say I refused to work on it, but I didn't work on it in the end. So this was a case in New Jersey. That's why I'm bringing it up. And there's an organization called the New Jersey Association of Forensic Scientists. It's various individuals from the state police lab system or from academic forensic science that kind of get together and hang out. And a prosecutor contacted the association asking if they knew anybody in their group that was a botanist. And so it kind of went out to the group, and I received it. And I was like, well, I'm not a botanist, but I do a lot of outdoor stuff, outdoor evidence. I do a lot with like the insects in the soil and pollen and plant remains. So I contacted the prosecutor to try to find out what it was that they were looking for, because one of the things with consulting is a lot of times the person that is coming to you for consultation doesn't actually know what they need. They think they know what they need, maybe because they've watched too many TV shows, but they don't actually know. So I talked to this investigator, and the case was a man and a woman were seen arguing outside in like a cul-de-sac, and they were like fighting, and the man drags the woman into the woods, and then after a while he comes out of the woods and she does not. So the guy goes home to his parents' house. Apparently he's very aggressive towards his parents. They feel unsafe. They don't know anything that happened with the girl. They call the police, and the police arrive, and he's in the backyard burning things. And so the police approach him, and his first response to them is, "You'll find her buried down by the creek." And of course they were not expecting this, because they were just coming because the parents, felt unsafe. So they apparently go down to the creek, they do some digging, they don't find anything, they go back to the individual, and he says, "No, you'll find her real deep." So they dig more deeply, and they find her remains. Now this case is going to trial. I don't know why, because he clearly kind of said he did it, but it's going to trial. And the prosecutor wants some sort of piece of evidence to basically nail him, right? So she wanted, they still have a shovel with soil on it, and they still have his work boots and his blue jeans. And for some reason, she wanted to see if we could match the plants at the place where she was buried with something to do with the remaining evidence. And I was like, well, really you want to look at the soil, because when you're digging through multiple layers of soil, that soil is changing and it's accumulating on something like a shovel. And then if you're going that far down, the individual will have to stand in that hole to continue to dig. So they will have soil from inside this burial, not just walking on the surface, inside the burial, on their shoes, potentially on their jeans and so forth. So she was getting excited about this, and then my first question was, well, so I'll have to go back to the scene where she was buried, and I'll have to do a test pit to, get the soil. And they were like, oh, well, that's going to be a problem. I was like, well, why is that a problem? Well, we don't really know exactly where it was. I was like, okay. You don't, yeah, exactly. You don't know exactly where this burial was? All right, well, it's probably a natural environment. The stratigraphy is probably pretty undisturbed. So as long as you can point me in the general vicinity, I could get the samples I need. All right, well, the next place I'm going to need some samples is I'm going to need samples in the backyard, because that's where he was arrested. And he's going to say, oh yeah, I've been at my parents' house, or whatever. I've been out, back behind the house. Right. So I need samples from the backyard to show that they're different from the scene of the burial. Oh, well, that's going to be a problem. Okay. Why is that a problem? Well, the parents aren't really very happy with us, so we'd have to get a warrant to get any samples. Can't you just take some soil from the neighbor's backyard? I was like, no, because he wasn't in the neighbor's backyard, and I can't say definitively at court, if I'm questioned by the defense, that it's the same soil. So, you're a lawyer, Miss Prosecutor, surely you can see how this could cause me some major problems at the witness stand if I'm not getting the correct samples. So, I said to her, if you can get that search warrant, I'm very happy to help, but then I never heard back again, so.
Maybe you had enough information, because that sounds like a, pretty doozy of a case. Go ahead.
So just a point on that, with the reconstruction, trying to go back to it. So back in the older cases in the 80s and stuff like that, most of your measurements are done through triangulation.
Mm-hmm.
So I have, from the 1986 case I'm doing right now that's going to trial next March, this 11-year-old girl murdered on school grounds. I had the triangulation, and so I go back to the scene, and if you don't go back to the scenes to do a cold case, don't do the case. Because you got to see it again. But I can take the old measurements, and the telephone poles that they use to go into the woods are now about 1.5 foot difference. But in government work, we're plus or minus 12%, plus or, a little error rate's okay.
Close enough for government.
Pretty much. Yes. So 1.5 foot on a poles is no big deal. I'm going to kind of come in the general area. So when I do those cases, I've actually, instead of taking tape measures again, I already pre-measured the clothesline. Mark it, loop it, put it to the tree, and then pull through the woods because I'm not fighting with a tape measure. Once I get my arcs and I have my spot again, I sink rebar. And usually I put about a 12-inch piece in, and I leave it about 2 inches under the ground. so nobody will see it if it's in grass, they're not gonna mow it. And then that way I have the measurement, I can re-arc it, and with the metal detector,
Yeah,
I can find my rebar again. And like for this one, I was able to mark where her head was, and then the items of clothing or book pack and all stuff like that. So then if we have to go back with the jury to do anything, I can reset. Then the other thing I do is once I marked everything, I cone it with traffic cones. Then I go to the distances and I photograph it to show 158 feet off the path. Here's what it looks like, a 3-foot traffic cone. And then the items along the line, and then you re-photograph it. So doing a reconstruction, you're using the old and sometimes really bad scene diagrams to kind of put yourself back in that spot and come up with the evidence.
Yeah,
So-
plants can grow, trees can fall.
A little bit. You'd be surprised how 36 years later, they're the
Yeah.
same.
A lot of change.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
How does
Has
it?
passed,
Yeah.
the layers of the soil,
Yes.
you know, the time periods associated with
That's
different
the
personal
topography.
effects
Yeah.
that the
Yes.
person might be
Yep.
carrying with themselves.
Yeah.
So that's all what archaeologists do. And I mean, you know, as I mentioned, I trained in the UK. They use archaeologists all the time for crime scene work. Because again, as archaeologists, we're used to the documentation, the sketching,
Yeah.
the drawing, all the paperwork, and so they find that they don't need to do nearly as much training for archaeologists becoming crime scene officers than somebody from another field becoming a crime scene officer. So yeah, it's all archaeology.
Yeah, that's true. A question for Art. So on a cold case, how the preserved evidence, how long does it last?
You think it's been preserved?
Not just thrown out.
There's a reason why they're cold cases.
Yeah.
Is because sometimes it was not preserved properly, initially handled properly, examined properly, and so forth. There's a whole bunch of different variables that go on with that.
Like hair?
We're probably using more paper back in the 80s and 90s for bags anyway, and then plastic then became, so we're pretty good in that area. I have found older cases, when I say older, like 1993, that some of the evidence was actually put in Stop and Shop paper grocery bags.
Oh, paper.
No, I'm saying, but
Yeah.
it doesn't really look that great if you're gonna go to trial with it, and you snap out your Stop and Shop bag, not your Searchy or Tritech or like manufactured evidence
That's
bags,
not-
stuff like
yeah,
that.
the old stuff.
So I can't, to answer that, every case is different because you don't know who was the collector, how they packaged it and preserved it and stuff like that. And then the life, I mean, it degrades, it's a biological
Like hair,
entity.
if you have hair, how long does it last that you could obtain the DNA?
Yeah, so remember I said I really didn't go to a lot of school and I have a history degree? So I'm not a scientist. The roots, I'm gonna guess, are gonna have some type of life shelf to them also because it's all biological matter. Hair shafts might last longer because it's a fragment and you don't have like the nucleic makeup in it. So,
But the other thing too is the techniques for taking, so DNA technology, when it
Oh,
first
yeah.
started, needed
Oh,
this
yeah.
much DNA. Now they just need this much. So even specimens or even evidence that was not well preserved and may not have a ton, it can
Look at it
be
again.
tested. So you guys are still hearing about 9/11 casualties that have been identified. It's because after they made the big IDs, now they have fragments, and they would go back every time. So I trained there. I was there in 2010 and 2012, and they were still working. Actually, we went to the opening of the museum. So what's happened is they're finding smaller and smaller fragments, or have found, and the technique is not there to make an ID. So what they'll do is they'll say, well, we'll come back to you in about 5 years and to see if we can get better techniques. So the people that are getting identified now, and there's been a couple in the last years, it's not because they found more remains, it's because the technology got better.
To
And they
identify.
But what
The
happened?
DNA test kits are more sensitive.
Yes, but
Right.
what happened with the John Benet Ramsey?
I don't
So-
know.
Did that become
I
a
don't-
cold case?
Let's not go there. I this is a continuing question of decomposition because taphonomy.
Yeah, that is taphonomy.
Right? So you want to tell us a little bit about what we might not know about taphonomy?
Sure. So taphonomy is really the study of how things change. It actually started in in the field of geology. It was a way to understand how you could take a living organism like a dinosaur and end up with a fossil. And then archaeologists kind of took hold of it as a way to explain how you could take like a Greek temple and end up with the rubble that we have today. So it's all the processes that change a site, an organism, from the environmental things that are acting upon it, the biological reactions, the chemical reactions, and then the impact of human action as well. And in forensic science, a lot of taphonomic research has been really focused on human decomposition, the changes that are happening in the body.
Right.
And there's still, you guys probably have heard of body farms, these places where people donate their body to science and they do various things to the body to study how variables are affected to speed up or slow down human decomposition. But that's kind of a limited view, because again, we know that the environment changes in just a scene, not even just the body itself. You could start with human remains that were buried in the ground, and by the time it's investigated, it's scattered on the surface because scavengers have gotten at it, because there was a big rainstorm that washed away a lot of the dirt or whatever. So part of approaching the crime scene is understanding what sort of what that scene could have been when it was first created versus what we're coming across today, and that can help in terms of how you tackle that scene, in terms of how you look for where there might be other sources of evidence beyond just the body itself. So I work a lot with the anthropologists because if I recover the human remains, it's going to be the anthropologist that does the analysis. But one of the struggles I have when I have an anthropologist on site, I don't always have an anthropologist on site, usually they're just waiting for the bones. But when I have an anthropologist on site, they are just, I hate to say, itching to get to the bones because that's their job, like that's what they're there to do. And, trying to kind of slow it down and be like, wait, there might be a footwear impression in this clay soil. That could be just as important. Or there could be, scraps of fabric that are outside of our burial environment that could provide information. So just trying to create the appreciation that it's a much more holistic approach to human remains. Yeah, the human remains are great, but they're just one piece of potentially multiple pieces of evidence that could help, tie the case together or lead to, identify the individual responsible.
Wonderful. So let's get to cases then. So anyone, who wants to...
That mostly do surgical pathology, look at biopsies and organ resections. They can do autopsies. Forensic autopsy is a subset of general autopsy pathology. And yes, we are supposed to be all MDs or DOs who have training in pathology. But
What is the training for an education for a coroner?
None.
it depends. It depends where you're at, because
And what do they do? What's their purpose?
sometimes they're the ones that are investigating, and they determine if a death is suspicious or not, and they could be contracted with a pathologist to do the exam, or there's some other states that are like truly terrifying where I've heard people who are not actual physicians doing autopsies.
Can a spouse or a family refuse an autopsy?
That's a good question. So it depends where you are. In New Jersey, there is a religious exception that's written into the law. Other states do not have that. We do. It is for people who objection to autopsy is a known tenet that they follow. So if people are Jewish, if they're Muslim. In Newark, there's a lot of where I practiced for a couple of years. They had Coptic Christians. Like it's a few religions. Catholics, the Pope is cool with autopsy. So.
But they can refuse, and that would hide the cause of death and the evidence.
It has. It has.
Yeah.
Yep. It has.
You would think so.
It has in New York City.
So
New York
this is
City
good.
has
This is good because it leads into my next question: is who owns the case? I think Art, you started that conversation in the slides. So help us understand. Someone calls 911 or your first officers on the scene. Who hands off to whom, and then how do we get to the ME, and then how do we bring in the consultant?
Yeah, usually we're called to the scene, and if there's a death investigation, it's ours because we're doing the investigation to see whether or not we're bringing criminal charges against anybody. And that's going to go to the medical examiner for their examination that may support our criminal case or may not. So it's kind of like in those type of cases, kind of work in conjunction as far as what's going to happen, or is the cause and manner support what we think happened and so forth. But then to change it to unidentified remains.
I actually have a case two cases actually that were just identified. Homeowner taking down a fence, went, oh, I think that is a dead body. Now, law enforcement gets called to the scene. The individual is a skeleton at this point, but they were found with materials that they had when they were reported missing, so we knew who it probably was, right? This person is a skeleton, incomplete. Tragically, I didn't have any of the dentition, which would have been great for ID. I had some indicators by stuff where they were found of what probably happened, as well as the information from being reported missing. But I worked with our forensic anthropologist colleagues. We have one that works in the State Police Office of Forensic Science. And how we work together, which is similar how we would work together, is she helps to do a physical profile of the individual. How old do we think they are? Male, female? I like to guess because I love anthropology, so I'm like, I think it's this, that, and the other thing. She tells me if I'm right or wrong. If there's any trauma, and she actually, I didn't, and I went, and I love these cases. I'm like, I'll take the skeletons, and all my colleagues are like, oh, thank God I hate this. I'm also the one they text if it's like human or non-human. I'm like, that's a bear paw. Nice try. But I went through all of the clothing and the dirt and everything that they brought in, and I actually found additional remains, and she cleaned them and examined them and found some trauma on the skull that corresponded to the information at the scene, that corresponded to the missing person's information. She also was integral in arranging the DNA testing to do an ID confirmation, and he was just identified almost exactly a year, which is, it pains me that it took that long, but unfortunately, we do many more IDs and fingerprints. Many, hundreds times more. Right. And then to your DNA point about CODIS, so the other one that literally just got identified, I think Wednesday, he happened to actually have a specimen or a profile in CODIS. It's very few people. It's only people who fit certain criteria under state law, who have been convicted of certain crimes or are charged with certain crimes, and it depends where in the state if your profile is in there. But if he had not if he had not done something that legally his profile was collected and put in there, we would still have no idea who he was. Absolutely no idea. Yes.
What's more valuable for the age, how long ago the corpse, the body died? You use skin, flesh, muscle, bone,
So time of death is a myth.
Yeah.
So when people are like, he died
Thank you.
at
2 hours, 6:05.
Yes. So not your longer term deaths, but your more, but your more.
6 years ago. What do you use to determine when the corpse?
It's all BS. It's all BS.
Are you asking, but you're talking about
bugs are
like
probably the
a
best
cold
way.
case identification like that.
Yeah, okay, well.
So just to cover that real quick, we had a infant murder from 1974 that we just exhumed a year and a half ago. And we got lucky on that one because the body was actually put in a plastic bag inside a styrofoam coffin. So it actually didn't deteriorate as much as we thought. And then at that point, that's when Dr. Gill got involved, but they're usually going for like the largest bone, correct me if I'm wrong, for marrow type of tests, things like that. So then it's like the femur, the spinal cord, or something like that. And then maybe newer ones are like more of dental, jaw, teeth, and all that type of stuff.
But you're asking, like, if I find a skeleton, how right? And
This skeleton over the fence, say, for example. Or your guy that they found in 1996. How do they know he died in 1996?
they know.
What did they use? The muscle, the skin, the bone?
No, it's a lot of it is investigative. Yeah. So it's when were they last known to be alive and when were they found? Okay. And then you try to narrow the window.
Now it's when were they last on their cell phone?
Yes, I was just going to say.
Cell
Yeah.
phone record.
not-
And people think I'm being sassy, and it's like, no, it literally, you know, how I use time of death, and they talk about rigor, and so rigor stiffening the muscles, liver pulling of the blood, body cooling. There's so many different factors with all of this, depending inside, outside, clothed, big, skinny, tall. Like it's completely. They've tried to come up with a formula. It cannot be done. Okay.
So, two things real quick on that. We don't put turkey baster
No.
thermometers in the liver at the scene,
Yeah.
number
No, no,
one.
no.
And in old school stuff, we used to actually do is newspaper pile up, the date, and all that type of stuff.
Well, nobody has newspapers anymore.
That's
But
what
yeah,
I'm
but
saying.
stuff like that.
All this stuff is kind of
You would
changing
be
more.
shocked how many people actually still cross off their
Calendar,
So I
maybe
get
that.
pictures of that.
We used to look at the milk container, what the expiration date of the
Yeah.
milk
And
was in the
that's-
fridge.
But that is still just as accurate as it was versus trying to do something scientific. So how I use time of death and these indicators. So if you say to me, "Oh, I just saw Jimmy alive yesterday at or like 4 hours ago, and he's green and bloated," I say, "I don't think so." So or I saw somebody. Or I found somebody and they're like this on their back. You're like, okay, who moved the body? So for me, it's more of if the findings don't match the timeline, not looking at the findings and determining a timeline. It's BS. And
So
that,
another question for
all
Art.
these families are like, well, I thought a more thorough autopsy would be done that included liver temperature. And we're like, well, according to CSI,
I just want to jump in real quick because all of this is actually archaeology.
Yes.
Archaeology is all about context and association. So what things are around a body, what sort of things are associated with a particular time period, whether it's male or, I mean, the body by the fence, I would have loved to have been involved with that because, the roots that are growing around
Yes,
the body
yeah,
can give you an
yes.
indication of
Yeah.
how much time.